get started here. So, talking about the primates, that's where I left off last time, and still talking about them. Again, right now I'm going through the general characteristics of all primates in general. And again, a lot of these two things don't apply to every primate, but they apply to a lot of them. Next one I want to talk about is dentition, okay? And this is, most of the primates have the same sort of generalized dentition pattern as all of them. Most have all 4 teeth types, so you're used to that also. Again. And basically their uses are, the incisors and canines are for cutting and for biting. These are some pretty impressive canines on this baboon. And then the premolars and molars are for crushing or grinding. Remember, the diet on most of these things are going to be, most primates are fruits, leaves, and insects. Okay. But not all of them have the same number of teeth as we have. So the dental formula, in other words, the number of each of these teeth does vary, just like it does for a lot of different things. One of the other big things about primates, okay, so I mentioned mammals in general, compared to other animals, have a much more complex brain. The primates, of course, have more complex than all of them. Okay? And where the big point of this is, and this is a term I've used before, the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is the covering of the brain. Okay, so the covering of the cerebral area, the cerebellum, the cerebrum is the bigger part of the brain. The larger that is, basically that's the area that's responsible for what we consider thinking. So memory, attention, perception, awareness, all that sort of stuff goes on up there. So the bigger that is, the more you can think. And so if you look at all this here, 5 examples of primate brains, it's wrinkled. And the wrinkling, why is it wrinkled? Because you're trying to fit more cerebral cortex inside of the cranium, so it wrinkles up. That's what's doing there. Human brain is extremely wrinkled, as is a chimpanzee. Rhesus monkey, not so much. But so all these are apes from here over. Rhesus monkey is a old world monkey. Okay. Another thing then is senses. Okay. And we talked about this early on. A lot of mammals, the primary sense is olfaction, the ability to smell. Okay, the ability to smell is reduced in most of the primates. Not all of them, but most of the primates don't smell as well. We can smell things, but it's definitely, compare us to what a dog can smell. It's pretty impressive. Yeah. And all this is basically, all you're doing is it's a way of registering chemicals in the environment. Okay. As a result, all primates are much more heavily rely on vision. And of course, the eyes are set up, we talked about before, to allow binocular vision. We talked a whole bunch about that. Some animals, it's sort of interesting, that not all the primates are trichromatic. Some of them are dichromatic. We went through all that before. The ones that tend to be dichromatic are nocturnal in general, and the ones that tend to be trichromatic are diurnal. Makes sense. Again, you need lots of light in order to fire up the cones. This is all pretty much, we went pretty heavy on vision before. Okay, so I guess I'll copy some of this again. So we have this stereoscopic vision as a result. We have a huge overlap in the fields of vision here. And that allows us for that 3D and depth perception. So again, just remind you that pretty much that's all review. Another thing about them is maturation and learning. Okay, so the gestation period is relatively long, so again the time spent as embryo and fetus is pretty long in general, and then after that. I'm not sure I'm messing with that right now. Okay. Another thing about them, the long lifespan, and a lot of the time, once once they're born, then there's a lot of time spent in parental behavior. So much more than a lot of other animals. If you think about a deer, for example, there's basically parental care that goes on in a deer, but it's no longer than 6 months. And of course, in humans, it can go on for amazingly long periods of time, many years. That sort of stuff. Another characteristic is the fact, are some of the behaviors in general, not all of them. I'll be talking about a few of them that aren't, but in general, we're diurnal. Some of the prosimians are not. And there's a lot more, our behavior is very plastic, that's what we call it, basically. Behavioral plasticity, I've talked about morphological plasticity before, but there's also behavioral plasticity. We can change. Now, a lot of animals have behavioral plasticity, but not as much as humans. For example, any deer hunter will tell you that if once deer season starts, deer completely change their behavior. They can do that. Okay, but humans and most primates, it's very, very hard. If you've taken a course in sociology or anthropology, it's sort of interesting. Anyone have a statistics course? Okay. Okay, let me see what you remember from statistics. Okay. What is an alpha value? No clue what an alpha value is. Okay. Didn't take a class from me then. I beat an alpha value right through your head. Okay. Okay. Alpha value is the probability that the null hypothesis is correct. Okay. So the idea, the lower the alpha value, the more significant the difference is between two things. Okay. Why am I talking about this? In general, we set our alpha value at 95%. Okay, 0.5 is the alpha value. They don't do that in sociology. They don't do that in anthropology because you never hit that, because there's too much change going on. The alpha value is usually set around 90%, sometimes even 75%, because the behavior of primates is so variable, because humans do what they want to do. Well, they're not the only primate that does what they want to do, so there's a lot of flexibility in behavior based on getting in here. And there's a lot of group behavior in that. Many of them are social, not all of them, but many are social. And in groups, usually one of the big behaviors with groups is males tend to leave the groups and go find another group or start their own group. And so it's rare for males to remain in the population. Of course, in human population, it's not. Okay, with that in mind, so that's just sort of the general information. I want to look at some of these groups. Again, remember, I'm going to look at the prosimians, and I've got 3 different groups in there. I got the tarsiers, I got lorises, and the lemurs. I'll talk about them, and then we'll go to the anthropoids and talk about them. So I want to go through some of these groups here and talk a little bit about each one. So these we're going to learn some families, we're going to learn some genera, and a couple species too. Okay. So I'm going to talk about, basically, remember early on I talked about 7 different families that deal with these sort of things. Okay. So again, this is just basically the checklist. I'll put these all up for you. They should be in your notes, but I'll put them all up here. Again, primates, you have prosimians. So there's lemurs and lorises. They are families Lemuridae and Lorisidae. Tarsiers or Tarsiidae. And so those are all the things we're going to cover with the prosimians. Okay. Anthropoids, basically I broke those into 2 groups, the New World monkeys, and then the Old World monkeys and apes are a group of their own, but they can then break them down. So the New World monkeys, there are a number of different families. The only family I'm going to be talking about is Cervidae. Okay. Old World monkeys and apes, I'm going to mention basically one family here, Cercopithecidae, and I'm going to be talking about 2 different kinds of monkeys in these groups here. The Cercopithecines, these are the big ground monkeys here, terrestrial ones, and then the colobines, they kind kind of neat group. So I'll talk a little bit about them. Apes, then I'm going to mention the families Hylobatidae and the family Hominidae. Okay, and then these are basically the species, the genera I'm going to need you to know. Okay, so to begin with here, talk about the prosimians. There's my hand deal on that. So first of all, we'll talk about lemurs and lorises before we begin. Okay, so these are without a doubt, and this is, if you look at a lemur and you compare it to a human, they don't look a thing alike. Okay, we don't think of monkeys at all when we think of lemurs. Lemurs, they look a whole lot. They look like a raccoon, really. And as there are a lot of them, again, of all the animals, lemurs and lorises, they basically rely heavily on olfaction still. Okay. They do have good eyesight, but they're markers with sense. You don't see that in the other primates at all. So they're pretty primitive here. Other characteristics here, again, very, very short gestation period. The adults, the young grow up very fast, unlike what we see in the rest of the primates here. Okay. Their eyes, not so much in the lorises. The lorises still have the forward-facing eyes, but lemurs their eyes are kind of split apart again, similar to what you would see in a carnival. Okay. So these are jumping all over, but I'm not sure why I got them out of order. Okay. Stereoscopic vision, less important than that. So yeah, that's enough about them. Okay, so family Lemuridae. Okay, so where you find the lemurs is Madagascar. I say that, but of course everyone knows that. They've all seen movies called Madagascar, and you got lemurs in them. There's lots of different species in a very, very small area here. Again. That's because of speciation. You get adaptive radiation. You got a place where nothing is there, and the lemurs arrived, and they could basically create a whole bunch of different niches in those areas here. Okay. The small ones that are nocturnal tend to be insectivores. The larger ones tend to be diurnal, and they're more omnivorous. They'll eat all sorts of things. Most are arboreal in this group, and some use large social groups. The other group here, Lorisidae, these are really weird-looking guys. Okay, they often called they're known. Lorises are also called lories for short. Okay, somewhat similar in appearance to lemurs. A much more rounded face, I think. But where you find these tend to be. Some are Afrotropical, but the rest are Indo-Malay. You can find them. Okay. They are nocturnal, and again, their habitats are unlike in Madagascar, where that is the only primate you have in Madagascar, and you get this adaptive radiation. Where they live, there are other primates, and so as a result, they're probably competing with them. And so one way to avoid competition is this is basically what they have is this is called temporal partitioning. Monkeys tend to be diurnal, and so the lorises tend to be nocturnal. So they basically survive that way. Climbers, again, I've talked about this already, that they're arboreal. These are not fast-moving organisms. And again, because once you mention nocturnal, then you don't have a lot of fruit eaters and vegetation eaters at night. They tend to be, one of the reasons you're active at night is that's when the insects are active. This guy here, he looks even weirder. Okay, this is Tarsieridae, the prosimians. Does he look familiar to anybody? Should a little bit. I'll talk about it in a minute here. Family Tarsieridae, they also are nocturnal, and these are all Indo-Malay where you find them. This is another one here. Is that looking familiar to anybody yet? Look like any character you've ever seen?
Mort from Madagascar.
Huh?
Mort from Madagascar.
Oh, I haven't seen that work from Madagascar yet. Okay. The thing is, I must have taken this slide out. How about Gollum from Lord of the Rings? That's who he was modeled off of them. So, just I got that one. Okay, swip over to the other hand here, other part of the hand here. Again, so we've done prosimians, the anthropoid side of the hand, New World monkeys. And okay, so this is general characteristics about the anthropoids in general. They're larger and larger brains. I already talked about all this in the prosimians. And they are going to be relying on vision and not olfaction. And many of them are trichromatic. Only a few of them are dichromatic. But it happens. Okay. And again, this is all stuff we talked about already here. This is longer parental care, and they're going to be much more social. So first with the New World monkeys themselves, again, and I'm only talking about one family here. And consider the New World monkeys, so they're found in the New World. Where are they found in? They are found in the neotropical region. And it's the tropical part of the neotropical region. You don't find them as you're getting down here. The lower part of the neotropical region is very cold, and you don't find a lot of these things there. So Central and South America. Okay. They all kind of look alike in the fact that they have their nostrils are wide and they flare out, okay, to the side. So they all have that same look on their face. There's lots of differences in sizes and coloration, but this is the general look that they have. They spend a lot of time in tropical areas, the tropical rainforest, your jungle. Of course, they're mostly arboreal in general. Okay. Some, not all, some have the prehensile tails. Mostly the spider monkeys are the ones that, spider monkeys have that. And these guys are diurnal in general. There are 5 families that I mentioned. The only family I want you to know in the New World monkeys is Cebidae. Some of the more big players here, ones are called the howler monkeys. Okay. And they get their names because I had a video on here, but it doesn't ever seem to work. But sometime if you want to see it, just basically they sit around and do this. They kind of look like a rock band singing here. But they do this howling noise. It's pretty cool. So howler monkeys are in this group, or Cebidae. Another important one are the squirrel monkeys. These are very common in zoos. They're pretty easy to take care of, squirrel monkeys. And probably even more common still, this is the spider monkey here, which is, again, spider monkey is the one that has the prehensile tail. And then this is probably the most common. You see this one a lot. This is the one, the capuchin monkey is often, when people have pet monkeys, it's usually a capuchin. They're pretty easy to train. Okay. Fruits and leaves, again, the usual diets. Of course, they'll eat insects as well. Most are quadrupeds, again, with the exception being the spider monkey, of course. They're the semi-brachiators. Okay, that's why that didn't work. I tried to do that. Okay. Here's my side note. Anyone ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Okay, what's an old movie here? Pretty good movie. Okay, does anyone know where the story took place? Raiders of the Lost Ark? No idea. This reference has obviously got to become too old, I guess. Yeah. The whole thing takes place in the Middle East, okay? Afrotropical region, okay? In the movie, there's a monkey, okay? So you think of Afrotropical, sure, there's all kinds of monkeys in that part of the world, but they're all old world monkeys. The monkeys in the movie was a capuchin. So I'm one of those people that you don't want to go watch a movie with me, because I find all sorts of problems. One of the classic ones, if is you see the guys, it'll be some sort of jungle film, they're going through the jungle, and they're looking for the enemy and all that, you'll hear this strange bird. Invariably, you know what bird it is they put in the movies because they want a nice, weird call? So put a loon. Okay? If you know anything about loons, they're not in the jungle. They'll use the loon calls. Another classic one, ever heard of Deer Hunter? The movie The Deer Hunter. In the end, he's out hunting deer. And they are in Pennsylvania. Okay? What deer should be living in Pennsylvania? By now you should know the answer to this question. What deer lives in Pennsylvania? White-tailed deer, right? They show he's hunting and you see the deer. It's a red deer. Cervus elafi. They only live in Europe. So, kind of a big mistake. Okay. So, oops. Anyway. Okay, so that's enough about the New World monkeys. Old World monkeys and apes, then. Put with that here. Old World monkeys get their name for an obvious reason. They're found Afrotropical, and they're found in the Palearctic region and Indo-Malay. Okay, so this is all Indo-Malay here, Afrotropic, and then this is Palearctic right up here, and over here in Japan. Yeah, so it's sort of interesting. There's a big colony that lives in. They're called the Gibraltar monkeys. So they live. This is the Strait of Gibraltar here. This separates the Mediterranean from the Atlantic Ocean. They live right all around that area right through there. Only one family, it's Cercopithecidae, but it's a huge family, and oftentimes they're referred to as the tailed ape because they look like apes and they're more closely related to apes than they are to New World monkeys. There's a big difference right there. Okay. The two subgroups are the colobines, I'm going to talk about these, and the Cercopithecians. Okay. So start first with, again, old world monkeys, some of the characteristics. They have tails. None of them are prehensile. So it's like your dog. They have a tail, but that's about it. Okay. The noses are unlike, the noses look different than the New World monkeys, and the noses all look different from each other. There's a whole lot of variation in what these things look like here. Most are omnivorous, will eat anything. The exception of that is the colobus monkey I mentioned before. That's the leaf eater, folivorous monkey. It only eats leaves. Okay. And lots of difference in sizes. This is the largest of all the Cercopithecians. This is of all this family here. This is a mandrill. Mandrills they're grouped in with the baboons. So it's 125 pounds. It's a pretty big monkey. Okay. Some of them are arboreal, but most of the colobines are in that group here. And then some are terrestrial. Most of the Cercopithecians are terrestrial in nature. Okay. Most are that shouldn't say semi-brachiation. That should say brachiation. Most are quadrupeds. Some will do brachiation. Not sure why they can't do semi-brachiation because they don't have a prehensile tail. Here's some of the examples I want you to know. Okay. So the mandrills, and you can't miss a mandrill because of its face color. If you don't have the baboons and mandrills, so you look somewhat alike. They're in this group too. And the macaques. And this is what gives this group, the macaques have the greatest diversity. These are the ones that are found in all the weird places. These are the ones, the monkeys in Japan are macaques. In Gibraltar, they are, as well as all over Indo-Malay. So this is the group with the highest diversity. Okay, so the most diverse of the macaques. So columbines, I want you to know, the colobus monkey, that's what you're looking at here, the one that eats leaves. And again, this is a proboscis monkey. You can see again what I've talked before, how the noses don't look like each other, and they all look, they're very, very different faces there. Okay. This is a langer. Not sure why I pulled him out. just think they're cool looking. And so basically, those are some of the color lines, the 3 color lines. Like, yeah, that's why I did it, because I gave you 3 circle pin the seats, so I guess I had to give you 3 color lines too. That leaves us then with the other hand, and these are the apes. Okay. The lesser apes and the great apes. Okay. So this group here, originally Afrotropical. Everybody was Afrotropical, with the exception, of course, humans left Africa. Okay. What are some of the differences between the monkeys? Of course, the most obvious is they're tailless, larger body size, and more complex brain. Remember, I showed you the brain of the rhesus monkey. It's got some wrinkles, but relatively smooth compared to that of a gibbon or a chimpanzee or a human. With the other ones in the picture that I had. There are 2 major families here. One are the lesser apes, and they are Hylobatidae, and then the great apes are Hominidae. So that's basically us. Okay, so I'll talk about the lesser apes for, and of course I'm using the word gibbon, and gibbon is one of the lesser apes and Hylobatidae. It's not the only one. Okay, so and there's also besides the gibbons, there's also what are called the siamangs. They don't get it. Usually when we think of lesser apes, we tend to think of gibbons alone. Sort of here. Some tropical Southeast Asia, again, extremely long arms with lids. These are the ones that do. They are built to semi-brachiate. They're definitely arboreal in nature. Okay. Thumbs aren't all that important, but again, they're basically their hands will act like hooks. And extremely powerful shoulder muscles and all that sort of stuff. And so they are brachiators. Okay, that's enough about them. We don't need too excited. The last 4 groups, now we're getting into the ones that we've heard of all of these sort of groups. This is family Hominidae, ourselves here. Okay. Large body size. So the biggest of all of the primates are in this family here. Unlike the gibbons, generally, which tend to have that long lumbar region, ours basically are shortened in this group here. Lots of complex behavior. Tool users, for one thing. Not a lot of the other animals are tool users. And more complex brain, of course. In all 4 of the genera, there's lots and lots of parental care for long periods of time. And the genera are Pongo, I'll talk about each one of these. Gorilla, that's an easy one. Pan, and finally Homo, genera in this group here. So a little bit about each of these. Okay, this is Pongo. We know the name orangutan. That's what it's called by here. And these are very, very limited range, primarily Sumatra, basically. Oh yeah, Borneo too. So they're only living on a few islands in Indo-Malay, and they are tree dwellers primarily. Because once again, you just have to think about the habitat. That this is still tropical rainforest that they're living in, and these are the ones that they can brachiate. The only time they come together, male find female and they'll mate, and the rest of the time they are separate, except female will raise a child, the offspring. They have what's called sexual dimorphism. I think I've discussed sexual dimorphism before. We talked about deer, this sexual dimorphism. You can easily tell males from females. And the males have, this is called the face flange, this big open air, wide open skin flap. Females don't have this. There's another classic one here in movies. There was Clint Eastwood made a whole series of movies where he was a character who had a pet orangutan named Clyde. Okay. Clyde was supposed to be a male. This is what Clyde looked like. Okay. Why didn't they use a male orangutan? it would have ripped Clint Eastwood to pieces. Okay, that's why. They are not a friendly animal. Okay, this is, you know, as much as you just want to hug that. Don't you just want to hug that thing? Yeah, me neither. Okay, anyway, they're extremely strong and bad tempered. Females have a much better disposition. So that's why if you ever see a orang in a movie or something like that, it's always going to be a female. Okay. So they're fruit eaters for the most part. Yeah, everything is, they're omnivorous, but that's their primary food source. Makes sense. And they can be big. Males, 200 pounds. So that's, and much, much stronger than any human. So a lot of the cases, most of the primates were not the strongest, without a doubt. Okay. Then we talk about size. Here's the winner. And that's genus Gorilla, of which there's a number of different species. Gorilla. So without a doubt, so the existing of all the primates that exist on the face of the earth, this is the biggest. How big is it? Basically, it's about twice the size of orangutan. So that's a huge animal. Unlike the orangutan, which were fist walkers, these guys are knuckle walkers. We talked about that before. Do this one. I guess you really can't see one of those pictures of that. And these were one of my examples of exclusively vegetarian. Okay. Males, 400 pounds. Females weigh as much as a male orangutan. So these are very, very big animals, very, very strong. And of course, they would be very dangerous to mess with these guys. So the family group, they tend to be polygamous. And primarily when we say polygamous, that means one mate of one species, and the other species, there's several mates. So when I say polygamous, a lot of people say many wives. Well, that's true, but it's also incorrect. Because there are some animals that are polygamous, where it's one female and many husbands, if you will. Okay, so this is what's called polygynous, is the proper many jennies, we like to say, polygynous. Okay, but you can also have polyandrous, many males. So this is a polygynous group. And yeah, males are very as they get older, the hair on their back goes white. So it happens to a lot of animals out here. But on this case here, that shows dominance. Next up is Pan. And Pan, there's basically two different groups in Pan. There's different types. Those groups are. There's a number of different types of chimpanzees. But basically, chimpanzees and the other group are known as bonobos. A lot of people have never heard of bonobos because they look exactly like a chimpanzee. In fact, this picture here, I'm thinking these are bonobos. You can't really tell them apart, just basically on their habitat, because they're in a tree. They're a little bit smaller, so if you don't have them together, one right next to each other, you can't really tell them apart. So, but the bonobos tend to live in the trees. These guys are, all of these are Afrotropical. And again, knuckle walkers again in this group here. They're kind of interesting in that they're different than gorilla in the fact that this is not necessarily a polygynous group. They tend to basically have, they live in a group. There is no alpha male, there is no alpha female. You could, at least not permanently. You have some that are obviously, the older ones tend to be leaders and all this sort of thing, but there's not strict mating between the alpha males and the alpha females you see in a lot of other animals. They look an awful lot alike, males and females, not a lot of relative differences between them, maybe size. We look at this, you say, oh, these guys must be male, that must be female. I don't know. I don't know what they are. Just a good Okay. They are omnivorous, and so them and baboons will also kill for meat. Of course, humans will. Not a lot of, so the ability to hunt is only in a few groups. Okay. Finally, Homo, that's us, humans, and one existent species, Homo sapiens, And I'm not gonna talk at all about humans, because if you think about it, every other class you have on this campus, that's all you talk about are humans. You take history, you take English, you take anatomy and physiology, any of those sort of courses, it's all about humans, so I'm not gonna do it. So, you know enough about us here. So, I'm gonna end that there. What am I set for time? Yeah, let's just end up short today. Yay! Good, Grubaugh.